In this session, we're going to take a look at a feature called dynamic hierarchy policies that EmpowerID has. Now, dynamic hierarchy policies are used as like an autopilot for creating data-driven groups or management roles in EmpowerID. So the use for the dynamic hierarchy policies is to be able to automatically generate groups or management roles and put people into those groups or management roles based on data that we find on the person object. So for instance, if you need automatically generated groups for departments or for regions or for divisions or countries or a particular role you need groups for, or anything where it can be generated from data. And these are typically done in the native environments, like in Exchange and other places, through PowerShell scripts or through attribute-driven policies that you might have. Well, EmpowerID's version of that is the dynamic hierarchy policy. All right, so we're going to take a look at how that works and what we can use them for, the different types of policies that we have. So in our interface, in the legacy administrative interface, there's dynamic hierarchies down here as a menu item, a menu node. And in here we have our inbox and our policies. Okay, so similar to other processes in EmpowerID, the dynamic hierarchy policy process works on the concept of generating the required transactions that need to happen, putting them into an inbox or a queue table, right? And then another job coming along behind and processing that queue table. So we have our policy, we have our engines, and we have our inbox that's used to do those processes. And we'll take a look at those jobs in just a moment. And first of all, we're going to go to our policies under our dynamic hierarchies. Now, within the dynamic hierarchies policies, we have a number of types that we can do. So if we click the plus sign on the screen here, we're going to create a new policy. So the primary areas of configuration on a dynamic hierarchy policy is number one, the policy type. The policy type has a lot of different types of dynamic policies that we can create. And primarily there are three different primary types. There's the account attribute external roles and locations, and we'll go into those extensively in our lifecycle, identity lifecycle topics. The account attribute external role and location policy is one that can be used to look at HR data and create the external business roles and the external locations associated with an HR system or an external system, and those are based on the data. So for instance, you may have locations that you want to generate based on the departmental information or the branch information or regional information or something like that that's coming across from HR. And you may want to have your business roles created based on, say, the job code or the position codes or something like that. So you can create a policy that will generate that internal hierarchical structure based on that data. Right? Then the next type we have are for generating groups in the native environment, say an Active Directory or Microsoft Entra ID. And we have different types we can do: single level, one level dual attribute groups, one level single attribute groups. So what this would be is if I wanted to create a group that was a combination of, say, the company and department, right? So I could have groups that are based on the combination of company and department attribute. A single attribute group would be maybe I just want departmental groups, right? We even have one level triple attribute groups. So I could have based on maybe business unit, division, department, something like that. Okay, so I could create those groups. Then we have our management role groups, and the management role groups can create management roles on the same concept, a management role based on the data in the person object, right? And when we do two-level attribute management roles, what that's going to do is level one. So for instance, if you wanted to create management roles for, say, business countries and business units, or countries and cities, then your first level might be the country, the second level might be the cities. And what that would do is it would create a management role definition for all of the countries. And then when it generated the management roles based on the cities, it would use the country for each city as the management role definition, right? So that way you could have management roles for all your cities, but if you wanted to separate them out for management, things like that, you could say, I want to see all the management roles that are built from the management role definition for a particular country, and that would give you a subset of those management roles. So you can do either single level or two level attribute management roles. And then we also have the ability, now it's kind of gone out of favor with Microsoft, but you can create nested groups. So I could create nested groups at two levels, right? So I could have, again, with the cities and the countries, I could create country level groups, and I can create city level groups, and I can nest the city level groups into the country groups to create a nested structure like that, right? So it's different than the one level dual attribute groups and one level single attribute groups and triple attribute groups, because all these do is they create flat groups. They create different groups with combinations of those attributes. The two-level attribute nested actually creates the nesting relationships. Okay, and then we have organization chart groups. Organization chart groups will create a group for each manager, anybody who has a direct report in our data structure. So if you are a person and you have direct reports, then we would create a group for all of the managers, and we would put their subordinates into that group as members. Okay, so those are the different types of policies that we can create. Now, for purposes of this demonstration, this explanation, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a single level attribute group to show how that works. All right. Then the next area we can complete is the information, basically the identifying information about our policy. So we'll just create department level groups. So we'll just name it so we know what it looks like in the grid. So we'll just name it department groups. You can put a description in if you want. And then the directory, this is what account store do we want to create these groups in. So you can create the groups in Active Directory, in Entra, in any integrated account store or system where we have the ability to create and manage group memberships. Create groups and manage group memberships. Active Directory. Then we have our scheduling, our hierarchy generation, and our hierarchy and our membership calculation. So there are 4 jobs that support our dynamic hierarchies, right? There's what we call the dynamic hierarchy generation job. The dynamic hierarchy generation job will actually look at all of the data that's in scope for this policy, and it will populate an inbox table for the generation that says, okay, these are all of the groups that need to be created, or these are all of the management roles that need to be created, or these are all the management roles that need to be deleted, or groups that need to be deleted if we're doing a cleanup process. Okay, so it first looks at the data and decides if there are any groups that need to be created based on the data. And it puts those into an inbox, dynamic hierarchy generation inbox, right? Then we have another job that comes along, and that's the dynamic hierarchy fulfillment job. And we can take a look at those real quick here. That'll be under our servers and roles. We can look at our jobs. So if we go over here, so we'll look at the server jobs that are associated with our dynamic hierarchies. So we have our dynamic hierarchy generation job. This is the job that will actually create the entries in that queue table, that inbox, for any groups that need to be created. And then we have the dynamic hierarchy provision inbox processor. This is the job that will come along behind. It will look at the records that are in that inbox, and it will do the processing to either create the groups, delete the groups, create the management roles, create the external roles and locations, whatever the policy calls for, will be processed by the hierarchy provisioning inbox processor. All right? And then we have the dynamic hierarchy membership recalculation job. So once the hierarchy generation and provisioning jobs have run and created the groups or created the management roles, then the dynamic hierarchy membership recalculation job comes along behind, and it will evaluate all of the data to see which users should be placed into which groups based on the data that they have. Right? So if we created a departmental location or a departmental group called accounting, then it will go through and it would look for any people that have accounting, the value accounting in their departmental attribute, and it would put that person into the group that the hierarchy generation and provisioning jobs had created. Right? Now, this works the same concept as the generation job. It will create inbox records for any memberships that need to be adjusted. Right? So if it finds that someone is in a particular management role or group because of their data, and that data has changed, it will put a record out in the membership inbox that says this membership needs to change. If it's a brand new person that just showed up, then it'll put a record out there that says this person needs to be in this particular group. Right? So it populates that inbox table. And then the dynamic hierarchy membership inbox processor job comes along behind and evaluates the records in that membership inbox table, and then actually takes care of processing those memberships. Right? So there's 4 jobs that do the work for our dynamic hierarchy policy. And those jobs are controlled in the policy configuration here under hierarchy generation. You can either enable or disable the hierarchy generation, and you can enable or disable the membership recalculation. Now, as a rule of thumb, as a strategy, when we're creating a policy for the first time, typically what I'll do is I will activate the hierarchy generation aspect first and allow that to run all the way through to actually create all of the groups or management roles. And so I'll watch that process play out and make sure that all of them get created. And then I'll go in and activate the membership recalculation. All right. And the reason I do that is because these run on a schedule. And if you have them at the very start, if you enable both of them at the same time, it's going to run this membership recalculation job, but it's not going to find anybody to put in members because the groups haven't been created or the management roles haven't been created yet. And so basically you're wasting a cycle. And if you have this set to run like once an hour or once every couple hours or whatever, or once every 10 minutes, then you're going to be stuck because it's going to already have run and already rescheduled itself for an hour or 2 later before the generations happen. So once the generation happens, now you're stuck waiting for quite a while for the membership to run for the first time, right? So I'll typically just activate the hierarchy generation first, and then you can set a schedule. when you want it to run, what interval you want it to run, and the same thing for the membership recalculation. You can set your schedule on that. And now we get down to the policy settings. Now the policy settings are where we're going to select the attributes that we want to evaluate to create our groups or our management roles, right? And since we selected a policy that was a single level, it's only giving us one attribute to look at. Okay, so I can come in here and I can select, do I want to maybe do state or department, any of the attributes that are available on our person object can be used as the aggregation, the attribute to group by. Right now, if we were to select say a 2-level group, so we'll do the 1-level dual attribute group. Come down here, and we will see that we have first attribute to group by, second attribute to group by, right? And so it's going to create groups with all the combinations of the city and state in this case. Or if we wanted to, we could do by company and by department or division or whatever we wanted to do. All right, so that's the 2-level. Now, if we were to select one of them that is a nested relationship, so for instance the 2-level attribute nested groups, then we would have an option down here for the nesting. Do we want to add users as members at all levels? Do we want to create the level 1 groups even if there's no level 2? Things like that. Right? Do we want to create OUs for level 1? So if we're creating Active Directory groups and say we're going to have 1,000 groups that are, say, 2-level nested groups, we may not want all 1,000 groups to be in a flat structure under a single OU. So what we could say is if we were doing, say, state and city groups or company and department groups, we could create, the system would automatically create an OU for each, say, state, and then under the state it would create the city groups, right? And then under the next state it would create the next set of city groups for that state. So it can create an OU automatically and maintain that OU in your Active Directory if you're going to do nested groups like that. All right. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to switch it back to our single level. So we just want 1-level single attribute group, and so this will change to where we only have single attribute to group by. And we have other things in here that we can set, other settings. So we can claim matching groups. So say that you already have a set of departmental groups out there, but maybe they're not complete, right? You could say claim matching groups. And so before it actually goes to create, say, the accounting group for the dynamic hierarchy policy, it'll check to see if there's already a group out there called accounting. And if there is, it will go ahead and it will claim that already existing group as its group for this policy, for the accounting group. All right? You can mail enable groups if you want. And then we have a number of things that we can identify here. We can say empty group action. So you can tell the system to clean up after itself. So if when we're doing the evaluation of these groups, we find that a group membership has gone empty because there's nobody in the system any longer that has that attribute value, we can go ahead and we can delete the group if you want, or we can take no action. All right. And then we can have what group type we're going to use. Is it going to be distribution, security group, generic group, what type of group we want it to be, right? And then delay removal of membership. Now this is an interesting one. So say for instance that that you have people that are, say, changing departments, or you're changing divisions or companies, things like that. And you want the system to kind of have a lead time. So for instance, if my data changes and I change from the accounting department to the support department, your company policy may be that when that membership changes, you want it to you want that that membership in that previous group to remain active for a few days before we remove it, right? So what we would do is we would create your membership in the new group based on your data, but then we would set a time, a suspense time, to say in 2 days, for instance, remove the membership in the old group. So you can have a period of coexistence there where you're in both groups at the same time, right? So it just delays the removal of the old group. And you can set a number of days. If you leave it blank or if you put 0, it'll just immediately remove you from the old group when it puts you in the new group, right? And then you can have a naming convention here. So for instance, if the attributes that we are grouping by are the department attributes, you may want your group name to be the all accounting users group. Or maybe if it's going to be a distribution group, you may have DG dash all accounting users, right? And so you want that value that is in the department attribute to be substituted into that naming convention. So in the example we just talked about, you might say DG and then a dash and then all and then a space, and then you put your token in here, which is going to be the open squiggly bracket, and then value 1, and then the close squiggly bracket, and then users group. And so when the system processes and creates the group, it will create a group, for instance, for whatever value it finds in the department attribute. So if that value is accounting, it would create a group name called DG-all accounting users group. And you can put in here if you wanted to department maybe. All accounting department users group or something like that, right? So that will then generate the appropriate naming convention. And if you're using a dual attribute or triple attribute policy, you would have different values. You would have value 1, value 2, and value 3, right, for your different values that represent the different levels of the group aggregation. All right, and then you need to tell the system where to place the OU, where to place the groups, what OU to place the groups into. And since I selected an Active Directory, it brings up this OU creation location. So I can scroll down through here and I can find and I can select what OU I want these groups to be in. Now, if you did a dual nested groups, then this will be the parent OU where it will create the level 1 OUs in. Okay, and if it's just a single and you're not doing nesting, then this would be the OU where you want it to create and place all the groups. All right, and then you have alerts, so you can get alerts generated, emails generated whenever certain events happen. So if every time it creates a new group you want to know about that, you can activate the create group alert, and the create group alert has a management role here that you can notify. So anybody in this management role will get notified that there's been a new group created, or if you want to know anytime a group is deleted during the cleanup process, you can get an alert there. And if you are particularly happy about spam, you can have an alert generated every time a membership is created or changed in the policy when it runs. Now let's also take a look. There's one other value that we can put in here. It's an advanced filter that we can do. So say for instance that we want to create departmental groups, right? But we don't want to create departmental groups for say every single department, or we don't want to create departmental groups for all the companies, right? So maybe we have a very large organization and we just want a dynamic hierarchy policy that creates departmental groups for say any person that is in, maybe for just the sales groups, but we have a whole lot of different sales departments, right? but we don't need departmental groups for everybody. We just need departmental groups for anybody who is in sales. So it could be a bunch of different sales departments across a bunch of different organizations and business units, but we just want the sales groups, right? So what we may want to do is we may want to refine down or filter down the set of people, the result set of people that we're actually evaluating. So we may say that we only want to create departmental groups for any people in the system where the department attribute has the word sales somewhere inside of it, right? So we don't want to create accounting groups and janitorial groups and support groups. We just want to create sales groups. Well, we can include a where clause, an inclusion clause here, where we can filter down just the resultant set of people that we care about, right? And so what we're going to do here, now it's got a special format, right? Because what it's going to do, it's going to take whatever you type in here. It's going to be a SQL query syntax. It's going to take whatever you type in here and it's going to simply append it to the where clause in the stored procedure that is generating these groups, that is going and retrieving the data to look at. So for instance, if we take the example where we wanted to create a dynamic hierarchy policy that just evaluated any of the salespeople, then in here, we're just going to create, it's going to be just adding to a where clause. So we're going to start with and then we're going to say where the maybe person dot department like, and then we may say percent sales percent in quotes. And so all this is doing is it's going to add to the where clause a filter clause that says and the person dot department like sales. So now when it goes out and it reads the data to do the evaluation for creating the groups and for doing memberships, it's going to filter that data set based on only the people. It's only going to evaluate people where they have the word sales somewhere in their department. So this is very, very helpful if you want to restrict what you're doing. So for instance, some people may say that I want to create departmental groups for, in this case, sales department, or for the support department, or for just people that are in a particular region. I want to create city groups or country groups for everybody in a particular region, right? So you'd simply put where the person dot and then region or person dot extension attribute 1 or whatever it is has the value of X in it. And then that would generate groups and it would restrict the data set that it's evaluating based on this inclusion clause. All right. And that is our dynamic hierarchies. Now let's just look at a couple other examples, some of the specialized examples. So this organization chart groups. So organization chart groups, we come down here, we have some possibilities here. Use Empower ID's relationship data, nest the manager groups, and email the groups. Email enable the groups. Now this use Empower ID person relationship data. What this will do is if we look at a person object, so let me bring up a person here. My record Phil, for example. We have the org chart and relationships. All right, so under here we have different types of managers. You have your direct reports to, you have your other managers, you have your dotted line managers, etc. All right, your single direct manager of, dotted line manager of. All right, So this is our person relationship data. So if you want to, you can create groups for any managerial relationship. So it's a direct reports to, it's other managers or dotted line manager of somebody, etc., etc. You can create it based on that. If you don't check this box, if you have it not checked, then it's just going to look at the person record and the direct manager person ID of that person, right? So it's going to limit it to just the direct reporting relationships, and it's not going to look at the other managerial relationships that we have in our person relationship data, right? So in Empower ID, when we are looking at those managerial relationships, the primary direct reporting relationship is going to be on the person record itself as the manager person ID. Those other relationships are in a cross-reference table, a person relationship table, where it's got the person and the managerial relationship and the relationship type in there, right? So that data is generated separately for those other managerial relationships. And so what we're doing here is we're telling the system, do we want to just use the direct person relationships, or do we want to use all of the relationship data that we store in that other table? Right? And if you nest manager groups, what this does is if you have a manager that manages another manager that manages another manager, we will take those managerial groups and we will nest. If I have a group for me as a manager, because I have direct reports, right? So it'll create my group as manager, and then it will put members that report to me into that group. If you tell it to nest manager groups, then it will nest my group for me as a manager into the group for my manager, right? So in my manager's group, we'll have all of his direct reports, right, that are not managers, and then it will go ahead and it will nest my group as a manager into his group. And then on up the line, his group would be into his manager's group. So that you could basically, by the time you get done, your CEO, where everybody reports up to the CEO, would have a group, and all of his managers that report to him would be nested into his group, and then all their managers would be nested into their group.